Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special Prog Report podcast. This is our best of 24 podcast with, we have Vic, Dan, Nick, and Geoff. Welcome, guys, and hi, everybody, for tuning in. This is always a big podcast for us at the end of the year. Full disclosure, we did attempt a version of this podcast, but it was so long and talked about so many albums, it just didn't make any sense.
Even we were bored.
Even we were bored. So we are doing it a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit differently this time than we did last year. Last year, we sort of incorporated the wheel in a loose format, and we talked about 24, 25 albums. It was very long. So this year, we've shortened it a little bit. We each voted, everybody that's involved, and also Kyle and Steve, who are not here today with us. We have our rankings, and we came up with a top 10 that we're going to reveal at the back half of this podcast. And then also we each brought up are going to talk about one album as an honorable mention. Kyle was going to join us on the podcast, and he fell ill today. So sorry, Kyle. Hope you feel better.
Sorry, Kyle fans.
So we're going to start with Kyle's honorable mention album, which was The Pineapple Thief. It Leads to This. It's an album that we all liked very much. Probably just outside most of our, maybe between 5 and 10 ranking, I think. It's hard because some of these albums you like a lot, but this is one of those that suffers from being really early in the year. And then just 30 other albums come out after that. And maybe some don't kind of last as long in your sort of playlists or whatever. But this is a great album, shorter, 8 songs, really good Pineapple Thief style, Gavin Harrison, cool drumming, Bruce Sword writing some great melodies. It's an album I like very much. How do you guys feel about this one? Who sort of liked it a lot?
I listened to this album a lot this year. Definitely a top 10 album for me. I know Kyle loves the song The Frost. It's a song I like very much as well. Some of the other great ones, title track It Leads to This is great. Rubicon is great. The Pineapple Thief, I know it's not the album. They also released an EP this year, right after that. Which is another 4 songs, I believe, 5 songs actually, called Last to Run. Both are excellent. It feels like it's part of the same thing, written around the same time, same style of production, same style of playing. Just all around, like, excellent. Pineapple Thief is a band that has its own identity, I think. But the way they write songs, it's like songs, regular songs with like verses and choruses and bridges and stuff, but with a lot of layers underneath, like very well thought out drumming and mixing and the bass and all that. It turns out to be like a very interesting end result. And even though this album is just like more Pineapple Thief, it's all great quality stuff, in my opinion.
The EP was what reminded me that, this was released this year. And Pineapple Thief for me is a very enjoyable listen. It did not make my top 10. It's just outside of the top 10, but this is always a band that when it starts to play, it's very enjoyable to listen to, for those that like, the style of like some Porcupine Tree-ish style, they have their own sound, but that's kind of what it satisfies in me. So it's a lot of fun to listen to.
Yep.
Yeah. Good album. An album length album as well. I think the album, actually, I love the EP as a thing. I like this album as a sort of start to finish album as well. So I don't mind that those other songs weren't on it and came out later.
Yeah, what I love about it is the way Gavin Harrison adds to the composition with his drumming. Creates a whole new different thing to what Bruce Sword originally brings into the studio. Love it.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go to my next album, my honorable mention, which is von Hertzen Brothers, In Murmuration. I end up calling it The Relapse because that's the first song and my favorite song on it. I'm on an island on this one. I think in our group, maybe the only person that really likes it this much, other than Steve Joyce, who wrote the review for it for us. It's a good rock record. It's not too proggy. They've done more progressive things in the past. But it's just an album that I like. If you like kind of more straightforward with just a little bit of prog stuff here and there, great vocal harmonies, high energy, saxophone solo, stuff like that. It's a fun record. I highly recommend it. I like it.
Yeah, I love this. You're not on an island. I think it's great. Ever since Steve wrote about it in the way he did, I've been giving it a few listens. And I must say, on about the 5th or 6th listen, it really clicked. It's, as you said, not the proggiest thing in the world, but it's very kind of symphonic and dense and complex sounding, and those harmonies are great for a three-piece. And if you haven't checked this band out live, I highly recommend them. They're really good.
Yeah, they are going to be on Cruise to the Edge coming up next year, so I'm excited to see them and sort of dig into more of their catalog, which they've been around like 25 years or something crazy. So a lot of stuff
2000 they were
to
formed.
get into.
2000.
And we learned on the comments section after we did the New Listens podcast a couple of weeks ago that their sax player is going to be on the cruise.
Yes,
So-
they replied to us on the
Yep.
on the YouTube.
Oh, that's
thing,
cool.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's gonna be neat. All right, let's move on to Vic, who is gonna do the next one. If I can get this correctly.
There you go. Return to the Earth. Stalagmite Steeple. Robin Peachy's the guy behind it. He wrote and played most of the instruments. The album is produced and mixed by Paul Johnston. It's mastered by Steve Kitch. And this is a very, very mellow, very cool, kind of like you're floating in space. It's an album that has a very, it's almost like you have this feeling that you're isolated, and it's because it was written about COVID and the isolation. So the lyrics are very focused on that. Everybody knows me as the metal guy. There's nothing metal on this album, but it is prog. If you like kind of like mellow Steve Wilson's type vibes, it's a great album to listen to. I enjoyed listening from beginning to end, and it was surprising to me when I made my list that this actually snuck up on my list on me, because it was pretty good. Came out earlier in the year, so it kind of fell back a little bit as other stuff came out that I really enjoyed, but it's a great album. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and I that atmospheric thing right in my wheelhouse, and it was one of those albums that made me go, I must go and check out some other stuff that they'd done. And then I looked in my music library and actually found that I already had their previous album. So I'm not quite sure how that got there, but I remember it's called Follow the Watcher. I remember the title.
That's a great album too. I like that one.
And it actually played it back, and it's really good as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that Follow the Watcher had a little bit more Marillion in it. Did you feel like that at all? The last one?
Yeah.
But I like the way this guy writes. He has a really nice voice. And it's just something connects with me with his music. It's one of my favorite albums of the year. Maybe around 5, 6, 7 there or for me. But it's an album that I listen to a lot. And I like it's concise, 6 songs, a lot to each song. It's very, very cool. And sort of honest, really, if you like Steven Wilson and you miss what he used to do on his first couple of solo albums, this is an album you should check out this, because it really brings back that style a little bit, almost maybe even too much at times, to be honest, where you're like, that sounds like, a song off of what, Grace for Drowning or something. But nevertheless, it works. All right, so let's move on to the next one. And this one is going to be Dan.
Yeah, it's me. Well, so Leprous has a new album out. Leprous is one of the main bands carrying the torch, I would say. Definitely in the forefront of the conversation for progressive metal in 2024. And they have this particular style that evolved through time. And it was like very heavy and syncopated riffs and stuff that it's out of your 1, 2, 3, 4 compass of calling time and all that. But on top of that, there's like the angelic voice of Einar, and I think that evolved over time into something that is way more focused on the vocals and the vocal melodies and the high notes and the harmonies over the heavy stuff. And that's the kind of thing that happened to Opeth. A lot of fans don't really love that as much, the changing sound. But I think the last 3 albums or so that they did that are way more focused on this style. This one is a worthy one to be among those albums that I like them like very much. And Melodies of Atonement is an album in particular that I really love half of the songs, and the other half I like well enough. But still, I think it has its own identity. The song Starlight is a top 3 song for me this year. It's very strong the way it builds. The second verse with the drums following up is something like amazing, and a sound that only they can do. Like a Sunken Ship is a highlight for sure. A song that has a little bit of the growling by R&R there. And just in general, it feels like a more groovy album, more focused on drum and bass. There's a lot that's a fretless bass in one of the songs. Bard is one of the greatest drummers to ever do it, so of course it's a highlight on the album. And there's a song called Faceless, which has a beautiful choir doing the chorus, and it's just, again, an amazing sound that only they can do. So I'm a big fan of this album. It's a top 5 album for me. It's in an honorable mention here because I don't think it reaches the highs of some of their best stuff, and also some of my favorite stuff of the year that happened to sneak up on me as like very definite quality albums. And this is one of them, just not as high,
Yeah. Yeah, I sort of agree. I mean, when they were announcing this record, they had said that it was going back to more of like their metal sound. Do you feel like that listening to it?
No.
Not at all.
Plainly, no. No.
I don't think it was a metal thing, but like Daniel said earlier, there was definitely a more rhythmic centered type of sound, groove between the drums and the bass. There was a little bit more of that pulsing, type of movement on their music. If you throw distortion guitars on top of it, then yes, it would have been a more metal one. But I do think they went back to the more rhythmic style that they, that where they came from. But
yeah, there's a little bit more of Melina, but not a lot of a little. Yeah, sorry. Just a pinch.
Is that you trying to do Einar?
Yes, he was hitting that high C.
La 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 la. Well, whatever. Yeah, that's Melodies of Atonement. Great album. I'm a fan. So yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, let's see. I think we got Geoff. You were gonna do this one.
I'll speak in normal register for this one. Yeah, Beardfish, they're back. 2024 and Beardfish are back. So obviously Ricard is the central guy in this. He's probably been on the radar for 20 years with the band and Gunfly, and of course now as part of Big Train. And 2016 was their last album, and the Comfort album, and then he kind of switched his focus. And I think I don't know, but for me it was kind of quite suddenly that this appeared, and I didn't really have a whole lot of expectation, but my first play through it, I went, wow, this is great. What I love about this album is how kind of organic it is. It's not very paddy, not massively produced, and by that I mean overproduced. So it's Hammond organs, it's kind of Moogs, it's acoustic guitars, it's electric guitars without tons of effects and delays and reverb on them. And I just think that really fits with Ricard's kind of voice. And which is kind of, when I say it's unpolished, I just mean it's quite raw and quite immediate. Oh, yeah. Very different from kind of a singer or someone like Einar. And I just really enjoyed this album from start to finish. I was out for a walk today and I was listening to it again, and just every time it just kind of hits me. I love the epic out in the open. It gets a really strong sound, and again that very much European slant on prog. It's the Yassi focus, that even I suppose Jethro Tull kind of world of prog that I like. And again he's a musical genius who's really come up with the goods in this album. The band are playing great, they sound great, and if you haven't heard it, or if you think Beardfish or something different, if you've only ever heard the Void album and think they're kind of more metal, have a listen to this, because it's very melodic. It's very good.
Super proggy. Yeah, I actually, my first impression on this album was with their single "In the Autumn," which is a song I don't necessarily love, But when I finally gave it a chance, because I love Beardfish, and I have been following Ricard all these years, and he released some great albums in his solo project, Gunfly. They were amazing, and I think one of the albums called Friendship in 2018, that was one of my favorites of that year. So he kept very busy with that, and
Yeah.
also Big Big Train, of course. But this album, when I went in from start to finish, it made a whole more sense. I love Out in the Open, the epic, but my favorite is the title track, Beating Hearts. It's an amazing song, has a great string quartet session, straight out of a Zelda game. So it's right up my alley.
Ah, well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So, well, yeah, I love this album. I love them.
I think that they're one of the rare bands that has this really unique sound that only they do. And maybe it's a throwback to what you're saying, kind of that tall classic Yes kind of vibe, but no real band is sounding like this. Everybody's doing like more metal stuff and kind of things like that, and they're really in this world of kind of real classic prog. It's super proggy, like you guys were saying.
And
And the
very
album covers
analog, very analog sounding.
very,
Must have been recorded on a
very
Neve
wild
console or
and
something.
No
yeah,
plugins
exactly.
for them.
Yeah. Okay. So last honorable mention, I think, is going to be Nick.
Yeah, this one snuck up on me. It really took me by surprise. I mean, everybody knows Joe Deninzon as the violinist for Kansas, but this is not really his side project. This is something that he's been working on for 6 years. And just think about some of the names that appear on this album. Of course, the great Bill Hubauer on keyboards, wonderful drummer Jason Gianni, who's very core to this, not only as the drummer, but as one of the co-composers also. He really is kind of one of the architects of this thing. And a couple of lesser-known names in Michelangelo Quirinali, the guitarist, and the bassist Paul Ranieri. These are really musicians, top-class musicians. They really are. And when the album unfolds, you think immediately, okay, this is very classical sounding. You know, obviously he's a violinist, a renowned violinist, and this has got serious classical influences, but never in an overstated way. It kind of goes back to what Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Genesis were doing in the 70s, but in a very kind of contemporary way, and it sounds big and fat. And then there are all kinds of guest appearances from Saga's Michael Sadler, Trans-Siberian Orchestra's Chloe Lowry, and Randy McStein, who just continues to build his curriculum vitae as the go-to guy in prog. All kinds of guest appearances, which really make us a very varied album. Top draw prog from beginning to end. It has all kinds of variation, really mega opus epics, and also some shorter songs. And really quite a statement is made about halfway through the album when they cover King Crimson's Frame by Frame. Now, that might not sound like anything to write home about. It's nothing unusual. Well, it actually is, because that very complex riff that Adrian Belew used to played on the original is transposed into a different key, I think, and made into something quite different on the violin when Deninzon plays it. And it really brings the song alive in a way that I've never heard before. There's melody all over it. There are very classical sounding influences in parts of the album. And the epic is truly an epic. It's called Chasing the Dragon. And for me, it may well be the epic of 2024. It really starts in the most melodic way and an ethereal kind of a sound, but then it goes into all kinds of crunchy rock riffs and back to the grandiose, sweeping, epic sort of apex that you would expect from a 12 to 15 minute song. And it just said something about the standard of this album. Don't be put off by the fact that you may not have heard of Joe Deninzon outside Kansas before. There are Kansas-y sounding moments in it, but there's all kinds of other stuff in it as well. For me, one of the highlights of the year, and I'm very happy that you introduced me to it and made me write the review, Roie, because I've gone back to this a million times and I really love it. Yeah. Give it a listen if you haven't.
Yeah, I agree. It was a surprise for me too. It's a fun record. It's really high quality, and if you like I think it lives in that land of like Neal Morse Band, Transatlantic, Flower Kings, all those kind of bands. If you like that kind of stuff, this is up your alley completely. And even Joe, who does some singing on the record, he's a quality singer as well. I mean, it's really
Great.
at every quarter you listen to it and you're like, oh my God, it's actually like this is working.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a good one to discover for people.
Really had a
Joe-
cool interview. I was going to say, really had a cool interview with Joe and Jason, because in listening to them talk about the project and the album and how they were involved, it got me really psyched up to listen to it, and I was pleased. It was a great listen.
Yeah. All right.
And
So,
a
all
good
right.
cover.
So those were our honorable mentions. We covered 6 really good records. All right. So now we're going to go into what we deem as our top 10 as the voting. So we're going to start with number 10. And this, Vic, I think this is going to be one you're going to talk about.
So, gosh, that was a sinister laugh. This album, Blood Incantation, Absolute Elsewhere. This album, love this album. This is where I struggle with, if this album was released, say, 20 years ago, I would not have thought about this belonging in the prog world. But things change, and there have been bands that have come out with things such as Cynic Focus that have really sort of introduced the death metal side of music into the prog world. And this is an album from a band in they're from Denver, Colorado, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And this album is it's set up great. It's 2 tracks. You got side 1 and you got side 2. Side 1 is called the Stargate, and there are 3 sections. They call them tablets. Second side is the Message, and each side is about one side's 20 minutes, the other side is 23 minutes. Total running time is 43, so it's perfect size for vinyl. It's really cool how they set that up. And this is a very, for the world of death metal, there are sides of it that are like Morbid Angel, where you have, technical blast beats and guttural singing vocalist. But then you also have the very interesting mix of Gilmour type Pink Floyd passages and solos, and even singing like that. It's they I believe that they've tagged themselves. I read on one of the reviews, they tagged themselves as cosmic metal. It does feel like you're floating in outer space in some parts. They really do take you on a journey. This was a very pleasant listen. I think I was introduced to this album. I believe Mike Portnoy posted on Instagram that you have to check this out. The production is excellent. And, for a metal guy like me to actually incorporate something that I was not expecting, I wouldn't even put this in the category of like Between the Buried and Me. This is more like traditional death metal that's mixed in with even some fusion stuff. Picture like the
Mahavishnu Orchestra. you're gonna say?
Mahavishnu Orchestra and death come together, and this is the baby. This is the baby they spit out. It's very entertaining. So
I found it. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to chime in. I mean, it's not something I would normally listen to. I don't listen to death metal at all. And I was intrigued by this because it just started popping up on every prog site that we also follow, and magazines and other people that we know that like music. Portnoy, talking about it. It's like, okay, well, let me check it out. And once you get past the sort of growl vocals that come on earlier, it really quickly starts incorporating weird instruments and different melodic passages, and then it goes into like sort of Pink Floyd Animals kind of things in there with like Gilmour singing, and you're like, okay, well, I kind of dig this, and it's interesting, and I just think it's, I don't know, is it something that would be in our normal top 5 or top 10? Maybe not, but I think it's worth acknowledging as a sort of important album to come out this year, and I think it was a statement record. There are a lot of people that were calling it their favorite album of the year that listened to things like Neal Morse and Dream Theater. So I think that means something. I think that's interesting. Is it something that I'll listen to a year from now? We'll see. But as it stood for this year, I found it to be really, quite interesting. I've
it's
enjoyed it.
creative
I've
and
listened
it's
to it
out
a
there.
lot.
I'm also not a death metal guy. Opeth is the extent that I can go with enjoying it. But what I'll say about this album though is that the cover art rules. It's awesome. The logo is purposefully absurd. We all know that, but the album art is awesome. No AI here, I think. So
It
yeah,
doesn't look like AI.
yeah, it does. So yeah,
Now,
Yeah.
it's always interesting to see how the death metal world has responded to this album because, you know, when you compare to what they're used to and what they listen to, they start talking about listening things out of you know, King Crimson and just very proggy stuff. They even say that they can hear on certain keyboard solos. It's almost like a Jordan Rudess type thing. So it's this album has really put shockwaves out not only in the progressive metal world but also in the metal world. So it's an interesting epicenter of reactions that this album has brought.
But you know what? I think it's also, and we'll move on in a second, but I think that prog has started to be the label for anything that is in a genre, but that does something a little bit outside of that. So you're getting alternative bands that are calling themselves prog because they're adding in a couple of songs with weird time signatures or 7-minute songs. Now they're proggy. And to that same extent, this is a death metal band that has added things you don't normally hear on a death metal record, so it's becoming prog. So I just think that's sort of the two sides of that. But anyway, there you go.
Glad they got mentioned, so let's go.
Okay, moving on to number 9, which is going to be. We're going to stick
Oh,
in
my
that world
goodness.
a little bit.
Whoa.
okay.
Dan, you
Two
want to take this
growlers
one?
in a row.
Yeah, two growlers in a row. Well, I'll talk a little bit about Opeth with pleasure. I love Opeth. They've been doing a different style for years. In 2011, they released an album called Heritage, which was an album that didn't have any growl vocals. Not a first for them because they had released Damnation before, which was kind of half and half with Deliverance. But so one was very heavy, one was very soft. So there's a little bit of a precedent, but they really with Heritage took a turn to find a different sound. They got rid of the growling and the death metal vocals. They got more invested into the 70s production sound, into the progressive style, some Middle Eastern sounds. They went in a lot of different places and they explored that sound as much as they could through, I believe, 5 albums, maybe 4. But anyways, the Last Will and Testament, which just came out this year, is an album that got them back into that death metal world. And this was kind of a challenge for Michael, the lead guy in the band, because he really wanted to write something, but it has been, at this point, 15 years since Watershed, the previous album that had death metal vocals. So it's kind of a different experience for him again to try and relearn how to write those melodies. And surprisingly enough, I think in many of these songs, he sounds the best he's ever sounded with the growls.
Yeah.
And with very creative melodies for them as well. So they found a place that's kind of new, It doesn't sound like old Opeth. It sounds like both eras combined, The middle one and the heritage one, call it what you may. But
Right.
well, The Last Will and Testament is an album that is divided into chapters, in paragraphs, actually. It's actually a concept album, and it's reading the last will and testament of a father, a patriarch, a very rich man with conservative thoughts, and he has a family. And throughout the testament, he reveals secrets about his children and his family and his wife. And the story develops in a way that has twists and turns, and in a way, in the end, there's a plot twist and everything. So it's a very interesting album, and one that I struggled with through my first couple listens because it's an album with absolutely no structure. So the songs don't have verses, they don't have choruses, they don't have bridges. Some of them have solos, some of them have growls, some don't. It's just like boom, 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 boom. It's really music in service of the story. And when you take that into account and really concentrate and kind of get what they're doing with the story and what the characters are saying, the different voices and the conversation, then it adds up to something that's very unique, very well done, and incredibly well produced. So as I listen to it more and more, I got used to the changes and the twists and turns that both the story and the music go, and it became a clear favorite for me this year. So definitely a top five album for me, and one that I've been coming back to more and more. And I'll highlight a couple of songs. I know A Story Never Told, the very last song is a song that Roie loves. It's a softer
Great song.
that's pretty much the twist of the album is in that song. But I have a couple more favorites, which are Paragraph 6, has some very cool and different like keyboard solos and interesting synthesizer sounds. Paragraph 4 is also really cool. Yeah, I mean, they go everywhere with this album, and I think to a good result. So that's Last Will and Testament by Opeth.
Great description of the record, man. I think for a lot of people that are like, what is this album about? You really nailed it in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, I try my best.
I'm going to go and re-listen and give it another bash again.
I think I
got
haven't
cold
tried
when I
listening
hear the
to it with
growls.
the lyrics. I think I need to do
Yeah,
that. I haven't tried
the
that.
lyrics make it better, but you have to be focused. It's almost like an audio book with music, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah, interesting.
he has very Shakespearean lyrics, and they are not
Mm-hmm.
easy to get into, especially for me as like English is my second language. It would be an easy job for Nick. For me, it was a little bit more challenging, but still, I managed to get through it and enjoy it, and understand it. So well, but probably easier for you guys.
Not that Opeth needs to establish any sort of street cred in the prog world, because they've established that. But one of the cool things is the guest musician Ian Anderson also gets to play flute
Yeah.
in a couple of songs in here. There's some spoken word as well from him.
Hmm.
Um,
He narrates a lot. Yeah.
so no, it's a terrific album. Sound production wise, they went back to a more technical, tighter type of sound. The bass wasn't as overbearing as it has been in more recent albums. So it's a little bit more on the technical side when it comes to that. And it was absolutely terrific. It's a top 3 album for me.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the next one. And I think this one was going to be one Kyle was going to talk about. So whoever wants to jump in on this one. Vic, you want to take this one, or Geoff?
I'll take it. Geoff can also chime in because I know that he's a big fan as well. The Restoration fell victim to the fact that this came out was it February that this was released? It was early
January,
on.
Yeah.
Maybe even January.
It was early on. Obviously, a continuation of Joseph 1, which was the Dreamer. This is a part where Neal and the usual cast of characters and all the different vocalists just deliver on your expected Neal Morse progressive performance. I think out of the two, this one, especially with the vocal arrangements and the complex stuff that he does, gentle giant-ish type vocals, really cool stuff. Ross Jennings delivers a great vocal performance. It's a terrific album. Again, in the forgotten realm, just because it came out of it so early. And, he also had another album that came out afterwards. So, but it's a terrific album. Geoff, what do you want to add to that?
I think probably whenever these albums came out, probably a lot of the reaction was, they are kind of more the musical style, musical as in, stage musical type style of album, as Vic says, with multiple vocalists. And I think people maybe put that in kind of a certain bracket in Neal world. I think I really enjoy this album. I think there's a lot of kind of different elements, some as Vic said, interesting vocalists' choices. Ultimately, it's an album telling the story, but I think it's, for me, it's a really great conclusion to the whole thing. Definitely more in my wheelhouse than Blood Incantation.
The previous
although the Opeth album kind of, I didn't chip in, but I mean, sonically, I think it's a really interesting sounding album and all that's going on in it, and that's the thing that kind of pulled me back to this. But this one here, again, there's lots of good songs. There's kind of parts that are exposition, and Vic and I had the privilege of seeing it live, and I think that whenever you're actually watching and seeing kind of people singing parts and stuff like that, it was pretty spectacular. And certainly there were things that, having heard them live, I kind of went back and sort of thought, yeah, well, that's actually really strong as well. So yeah.
A couple of really strong songs. I mean, Cosmic Mess is a really cool kind of opener. Typical Neal Morse kind of rocker. All Hail, that beginning with Ross singing a bunch of stuff is really good. Everlasting was this great kind of jam at the end, and then the big epic close like Neal is known to do. I like this kind of style of musical, I guess, prog opera stuff that he's doing, where he's at least singing more rather than writing it all and having other people sing everything, because I think it just sounds better when Neal actually sings.
Yeah, his voice stands out for sure.
But yeah, I mean, I liked it better than part one. I thought part one was a little more spotty for me, but part two I liked. So yeah, good stuff. Okay, let's
What's
move
next?
on to the next
Number
one.
7.
Oh, back to you, Dan.
Let's go.
Man,
All right.
I tell
The
you what.
Australians.
Are you guys
Wow.
sure you want me to talk about this one? No other takers.
Do you like this one, or do you enjoy this one? Or?
Well,
You're gonna
Caligula's
do your high
Horse-
pitch. You're gonna do your high pitch. Hey, you know.
Caligula's Horse, Charcoal Grace is an album that came very early on in the year in January, meaning that in a way for us it's kind of a 2023 album because we got it very late last year, and I listened to it so much in that space of time and got to watch them live playing a whole bunch of songs from this album. Well, Caligula's Horse, if you don't know, they are an Australian band. They have released, I believe this one is their 6th album. Yeah, I believe. And they have this very particular sound, much like Leprous, where they have the heaviness in the back, but the softer vocals in the front. But they are way more rocking, and the songs are more, I would say, it's hard to call them normal, but they are more straightforward, let's say like that. Even so, they create something that I think it's really special, and it's the way they manage to create the vocal melodies that are so creative. And if you look at them in a vacuum, they are so separated from what they do musically. It's weird how they make it work and just marry so well. And so, well, Charcoal Grace is an album. The lyrically is very beautiful as well, and it has a lot of themes of how to cope with the post-pandemic world as well. So, Rise Radiant, which was their previous album, they explored a lot of legacy and how to grow and how to go through difficulties. This album has like of the next step in that, which is how to cope with the failures, what it's like to see an empty world. You know, there's a lot of heavy themes that they approach with such grace when writing the lyrics that I think it just elevates the album so much. And it becomes a very emotional album, even though some points of it are really just heavy and strong and rocking. It has this power behind it that I think it's a lot in part of who are the musicians behind them. That is just great. And Jim Bray is the vocalist and I believe main lyric writer. He has just a unique, powerful voice, and this band would be amazing, but not as much without him for sure. And also Sam, the guitar player and also main composer, he's just a force to be reckoned with, as Nick puts it sometimes. He's just a monster guitar player. It's just they are awesome people. I managed to meet them a couple of times, and it's just a pleasure to see them make music in this such high quality. You know, I don't know. It's an album that's hard for me to talk about because I feel like I've talked about it so much. I tried
so many times.
Yeah, so many times. I try to bring in something different, but
I know
it just rocks. Yeah.
It's one that again comes from being out so long ago. We feel like we've had it for years, you know, and it's sort of weird. But I did go back to listen to it recently, and it is still really great. I love the ballad on there. Sales is so great. and it's so unique for a band like them to be able to do something so
Yeah.
elegant, I guess is how I would describe that song. But Gollum is really cool. The World Breathes
Yeah,
with Me
Storm
in the beginning is
Chaser.
just awesome.
My favorite
So
is
yeah,
Mute,
fun
which is
record.
actually my favorite song of the year. Mute is just an amazing, amazing song.
I
Kind
just
of a
want to say
small
that
epic. Yeah.
I just want to say that Jim Gray might be one of the best frontmen I've ever seen. These guys came and toured. They did 2 shows in South Africa, for which I thank them greatly. And obviously, I went and watched them this year. And I got to tell you, that man commands a stage like very few others. He really
Yeah,
does.
man.
Doesn't shirk any of the notes while he's doing it. Commands the audience, and the band is just tight as anything behind him. Really a great,
Yeah.
great
Yeah,
band.
no flubs at all. And well, keep in mind, Nick has probably seen more concerts than all of us combined because he's 120 years old. So that's a
Yes,
big statement. Yeah.
exactly. My point.
Yeah,
Music keeps you young.
exactly.
There you go.
It's
Okay,
this album. I was going to say really quick, great follow up to what many believe it's their strongest album in Rise Radiant. Rise Radiant didn't get the attention because it was all in COVID. It didn't get toured. They described that they had to abandon it. And this particular album, Nick, completely agree. Jim Gray has the perfect balance between being very rhythmic in his delivery and just having soaring melodies and a great range. So it's a great album. Man, we're to number 7. And all these 4 albums that we're talking about, they're all in my wheelhouse. So
Yeah,
what's
solid,
next?
solid stuff. Okay, I'm gonna do the next one. This is
Oh, nice.
Meer,
That's
Wheels
Kyle.
Within Wheels. Yeah, Kyle's gonna talk about this one. I know I think this is his favorite album of the year, and definitely a top 5 for me. Just a great, different record. Again, falls into one of those categories like, is it even really prog? But again, it's sort of alternative indie rock with a progressive influence, with longer songs, different parts, signature changes, really great guitar solos. Just very cool. They got 2 vocalists, a brother and a sister. I got to pull up their names here because they're very different. Johan Margaret Kippersund is the girl, and her brother is Knut Kippersund. The guitar player
Nesdal, yeah.
is named Ivan Stromstad, and he's married to the female singer. And they have like 8 people in the band or something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's just really fun, orchestrated, lots of
Yeah.
keyboards and sounds, and it's high energy. And man, that guy Knut, he can sing. She's amazing too, but he has a couple of songs, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, where he's sing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
No,
from the
it's mind
heavens,
blowing.
you
Yeah.
know.
Definitely a
And
top
it's
album
just
for me as well, dude.
it's just for a moment when this album had first come out, I could not listen to it enough. I just think it's tremendous, all over the place, and it's still one that I like very much. I'll let you guys chime in a little bit on it, but I
Yeah.
highly recommend this
I
one.
would just talk a little bit about how it opens with such a banger in Chains of Changes. It's just
Yeah.
like a perfect album opener. And I love what they do with the vocals. Like they have a very distinct register and they sing with a different, I don't know what it is, man. It's a harmony that only it's very unique to them, the way their voices combine and the way they pick the melodies for the vocals and how they intertwine. When one goes up, one goes down, they kind of meet in the middle. It's very creative and cool, and I think they implement elements of jazz a little bit in there and symphonic rock in a way, and it's super well produced, as you were saying, like layers and layers of keyboards and other things. I think this album really stands out as something unique. I had known them before. They have another album called Playing House, I believe,
Yeah,
which is
we had covered that one, and it's great. I think they took it
yeah,
up a notch with this one for
yeah, I
sure.
agree.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think
but yeah, man,
to me, this
awesome.
is a band that if they were on a major label in America and got the push, they could be nominated for Grammys. I think they would fill that void of that area rather of like Arcade Fires and all these kind of bands that are critical darlings that win awards. This band sounds like them to me, and they do everything right. And yeah, more people need to hear about them and discover them, and I think get them some more attention.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Okay, Big Train, Likes of Us. Jeff, you want to talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
this one?
Yep, sure. So again, an album of firsts, really. Some lineup changes for a variety of reasons, not least the passing of David Longdon. The first album that the band actually, apart from maybe some of the earlier stuff, but certainly in recent years that they've actually recorded together and in person, and indeed, the band have said in various interviews it was mostly recorded. A lot of it was recorded and tracked live. It wasn't a case of doing the backings and going away and doing lots of stuff outside of that. I think it's an evolution of the band's sound. It's a step in a new direction, but it's not, going a million miles away from the stuff that people love about Big Big Train. It's not a concept album as such, but it has a whole lot of recurring themes. It has essentially an overture at the start. A really, really strong collection of songs, and I could talk about lots of them. Probably the two that I would highlight would be there's epics about where Greg grew up and where Alberto, the singer, grew up. Greg epic, Beneath the Mass, fantastic track. Just lots of really interesting creative sections. Alberto's epic Miramare begins with a cappella vocal intro and goes all sorts of directions from there. Some great ballads and Love Is the Light and Skates On, and a really kind of emotional kind of conclusion in Last 11 that pulls it all together.
The perfect song.
I saw them live this year, and they played all but one song from this album, and it stands up against anything I believe the band has done before. So yeah, a big. Certainly, it's definitely a top 2 or 3 album for me from this year.
And a top 5 in the Prog Report crew.
Yeah, not surprising.
You could almost hear the relief in Nick's playing, because it came so close to the band being in jeopardy, and then they come out with this, and Nick's playing is re-energized. For me on this album, he does some fills that are unthinkable, and some time signatures that are just inspired. You can almost hear that this is kind of like the rebirth of Nick DiVigilio in many ways. For me, one of the drumming albums of the year.
I think they just happened to luck out with the perfect new singer who embodies what the band is about and brings a sort of David Longdon's kind of flair as well, but doesn't sound exactly like him. It's a really difficult high wire act to pull off that he was able to do.
Absolutely.
Because David, you're talking about, in my opinion, maybe the best singer in prog in the last 25 years, and just a presence and one of the most powerful people to watch perform. So it's just an immense challenge, and Alberto is such a humble, nice guy. You can't help but root for him and want him to succeed. And I think they did it in the most proper way you can do it. It's really challenging. And I think they pulled it off,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, props to them.
All right. So, let's move on. Oh, okay. Dan, I'm going to pass this one off to you. Why don't you talk about this?
I feel like I'm talking a lot today, man. People
This
are probably
is the Dan
tired of
Best of 24
my accent.
podcast.
It's Whippersnapper Day.
Yeah, it is. Well, guys, Vola, the album's called Friend of a Phantom. If they are the Phantom, I am the friend. I love this album. I love this band. It rhymed. Bars. Anyways, I love Vola. It's a band that over time quickly became one of the bands I listen to the most. This is their 4th album, I believe. And every album is super high quality. They all feel like a collection of songs, and they're shorter, like 4 to 5 minutes. Some of them go beyond, like 6 to 7, but that's about it. They have a straightforward sound. They are more metal, but the vocals are very soft, and it has this wild blend. Coincidentally, that it's in the style that right on my wheelhouse with Caligula's Horse and Leprous and the stuff that I was saying about the band's doing all the heavy stuff. The vocals are doing some light stuff. So it creates a unique and very soothing blend that ends up you're listening to something crazy with syncopated time signatures and all that, but you're feeling calm and relaxed because the lyrics and the delivery are so chill. So, well, they created an album that I believe for them is very eclectic because you have songs like Cannibal, which is super heavy, and it has a guest appearance by the In Flames vocalist Anders Frieden. I think
Anders, yeah.
that's Anders. Yeah,
Anders
sorry.
Frieden. Yep.
Anders Frieden, yeah. So you have that, which is very heavy, and then you have something like Break My Lying Tongue right after that, which is kind of a drum and bass thing with electronic sounds. And then you have the best song of the album, We Will Not Disband, which is a classic Vola song with lots of I don't even want to say twists and turns because I think it's a song that's really consistent, but it can get heavy and softer and has interesting dynamics. Well, they kind of go everywhere with softer songs like Glass Mannequin. They all sound brilliant. Even in the heaviest moments like Bleed Out, I think they're all very creative and unique. And it makes for an album that's very, very fun to listen to. You know, you go through it in a breeze, and every song is unique and it brings its own flavor. It quickly, as I listened to it more and more, became my album of the year. So that's my number one. Definitely one that if you like a little bit of metal, listen to it. If you like a little bit of softness, you listen to it as well and see if you can meet in the middle. You know, definitely a highlight.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love this album. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's right up there. They just can do no wrong. They have a great sound, great singer, great harmonies, great mix of styles. The slow stuff is really cool. It's not your typical kind of slow stuff. When they get metal, it's just the right amount. I mean, they just have it. You know, sometimes a band hits a peak when they just are on it and everything is kind of working. And I just feel like they're in that zone right now with this record.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of short. It's only 9 songs. It's
Yeah,
what
it's 40
45
minutes. Yeah.
minutes. It's pretty short, but you don't feel that way. You run through it and you're like, okay, let's listen to it
Let's
again.
just say again. Yeah.
Again, it's just one of those albums I've been listening to on repeat all the time, and
Yeah.
just phenomenal. Love it.
I think the album cover is also super cool. That they're made by an artist that has done some work for them in the past.
Yeah.
It stands out for me. The whole package and like the design and the videos, everything they do is really cool. I'm
Really
trying not to
top
get
notch.
super fanboyish here, but if you want to hear us being super fanboyish, just
Really
listen to our interview with them because we went everywhere with that. So if you're already
Yeah.
a fan, it's worth listening because it was a very good talk. Asger, the main guy, he's brilliant, super
Yeah.
humble guy. So
Yeah, that
yeah, I
was a lot
love
of
this
fun.
band. Yeah.
All right. Okay, we're down to the top 3. Sort of an interesting top 3. Album cover of the year right there. John Anderson and the Band Geeks
Yeah.
with True. Geoff, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's not talk about the cover. You know, it's his thing. So there we go. So I think our history here is many people hoped for an ARW album that didn't happen. The Band Geeks were getting a bit of a reputation, doing some great Yes covers on YouTube. But that's no guarantee that when you put all those elements together that it's gonna work. But it did. I don't think I've actually seen like a bad review of this album.
Yeah.
And I think actually in Yes world, that's a pretty big thing. Fandom pretty much rallied around it, and it's a John. I've always said John always used his solo albums to do something different from Yes. This is the first time that he's really gone down that more straight progressive route Yes style music in a solo album, and it's very, very strong. We got the first song Shine On came out, very much combining that technical side with a kind of Raven era energy and intensity that you wouldn't expect of someone maybe of John's age. And I think this really is a really dream combination of what John does and what the band brings musically to this. Counties and Countries, a good example of Richie Castellano taking John's ideas and making it into, an epic track. And Once Upon a Dream, which is the sort of 16-minute one on it, it starts like Topographic Oceans, it moves through instrumental stuff. John's vocals are on point the whole way through this album, and the harmonies really both bolstered, by the guys who are with him. And ends with a very simple, simple song, and thank God, and shows that full range of stuff. And I think while Yes fans, I suppose, or different groups argue about what true Yes, what real Yes is, let's just listen to the music on the face of it, and set all of that aside. I would say it's the best album John's been involved in 30 years, and really hope this combination, produces more. Yeah,
well said. This is my number 2 album of the year for sure, and that's saying something because it was a strong year. This is as close as John has got to delivering on the Yes promise since he left, and it's a really, really good album. I'm still astounded by this cover. I just don't get it. Such a high quality album. Don't get put off by the cover, folks. This is the real deal.
Yeah, love it. This was a fun album to discover. You didn't expect it to be as awesome as it was. It was really like, oh my God, this is John Anderson. Yes, it sounds like everything you've wanted him to make in the last 20, 30 years. And it's just fun. He sounds amazing. The music is top notch. Everything about it is killer. Well, almost everything except the cover. But the long epic is there, and it's great. The opening track, True Messenger, is awesome. Shine On is sort of a big generator throwback. I think, it's fun. Great record. I think, again, like you were saying, I mean, I haven't read anybody say anything bad about this album. It's been sort of celebrated, and deservedly so. So
it's amazing it's amazing him at this age, with this group of musicians, have delivered something that is like a great throwback, but yet fresh and new. It's awesome.
Yeah, really cool. Okay, so
top 2, baby.
Top 2, and I think Nick is gonna lead us on the next 2 because he hasn't really spoken for a while. But let's go ahead. Neal Morse and the Residents, No Hill for Climber.
Oh
yeah, I love this album. I'm very, very happy to present this one. Every time Neal does something, there's an air of expectation, but this one particularly so, because it was his first sort of new band foray, if you like, into prog, without Mike Portnoy and Bill Hubauer and Eric Gillette and Randy George. And boy, does he deliver. Neal Morse and the Resonance may be a new band, but this is a new band with some serious chops. Unknown guys, Andre Medatian, Philip Martin is a little bit known because of his previous exposure with Neal. Johnny Bisaha, a vocalist who came out of nowhere and has just blown the prog community apart. Bassist Chris Riley, and Joe Ganzellian on one track helping with drums. Now, it's a very, very proggy album, seriously proggy. I mean, almost like Neal is making a statement that he wants to go back to that Spock's Beard 5 kind of early Neal Morse album, prog solo albums. I mean, it really is a throwback to that. But at the same time, it does a whole lot of things that are completely new. If you ever wanted to hear Neal getting his crimson on, well, there's a song on here called Thief, which does exactly that. If you want to hear Neal getting his Devin Townsend on, well, the closing epic goes exactly there. So who knew that he was this versatile this late in his career? Well, not late, but you know what I mean, as a mature artist. Now, it does follow that Spock's Beard 5 structure in that there are 2 long epics, which bookend 3 shorter songs in the middle. And those shorter songs are as good as the epics. They really are. I know you guys think I'm crazy, but for me, one of Neal's finest songwriting moments ever is the song "Ever Interceding." I just love the song. I love it as much as anything that Neal's ever done in the past in terms of his ballads. For me, it's as strong as June or We All Need Some Light. And I know you guys are giving me the crazy look here, but somehow that song just hits the spot for me. It brings tears to my eyes every time I hear it. But there's some more straight ahead stuff, straight ahead rock stuff like All the Rage, which was the single, kind of Momentum era songwriting. It rocks, but it has Spock's beard-like quirkiness. The first epic, which is the song Eternity in Your Eyes, is for me one of the best epics that Neal has written or co-written. I think these composers bring the best out of him, and he clearly brings the best out of them. The closing epic has a couple of moments which dip a little. I think the chorus is a little sweet for my particular taste, but that's only my particular taste. Soon after that second chorus comes in with a chunkier, darker riff, and all resolves in the end. What this is Neal Morse reminding the world that he's not one of the kings of progressive rock for nothing. Here he comes with a bunch of unknown musicians, brings out an album of the highest quality, which is really going to hit the spot and satisfy those people who are thinking, I miss early Spock's Beard or I miss early Neal Morse solo albums. This album consistently takes you back to those places and is as good, really, as those albums. And this is doubly astounding by virtue of the fact that these musicians have come out of nowhere, largely, especially Johnny Basaha, and have made their mark and risen to the target. It's a fantastic album. It's a must for any Spock's Beard fans, early Neal Morse era Spock's Beard, and of NMB for that matter. Don't miss this, folks. And if you're an atheist, it's not going to offend you, I promise you. Give this one a listen. It's great.
Shout out to Rich
Wow,
Mauser.
man. Now that
Rich Mauser,
was a review of a record.
I should have mentioned Mauser. The production is fantastic. Absolutely correct.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think you said everything that could be said about this record. I mean, I think we all love it. It's been great to have to listen to. Neal's been super busy this year. He also had the singer-songwriter album in the middle of the year. I forget the name.
Late
Bloomer. So again, 3 albums, but again, amazing music. I'm just going to echo what you said. I mean, I think the epics are great. The 2 rock songs are great. I'm not as high on the ballad as you. It's fine. It's not for me as up there as one of his best, but it's certainly a good song. Yeah, it's a fun. It's definitely a throwback prog record for him, which is great. I'm glad he did it.
I think a couple of years ago we had Rio come out with the Myth of Mistrephus, and that sort of satisfied the Spock's Beard fan. This does the same thing, where it is just a great listen from start to finish. And Chris Riley not only plays bass and all that stuff, he brings in a terrific amount of composition to this as well, which gives it a little bit of a different twist. Young guy, keep him on your radar, because I think he's kind of following that sort of Neal epic type of complex prog writing. It's a great gathering of local artists. Hopefully this will crank out a lot more music for Neal and for the guys.
Yep. Okay, so we should move on to our top album. I think we all know what it is if you've been following along.
Yeah.
No surprise. Frost, Life in the Wires. Nick, you want to give this one a go as well?
Yeah, man.
This was absolutely your favorite, right?
Absolutely head and shoulders above everything else, my favorite album of the year. I mean, I love Frost. I always have. And I'm a great fan of Million Town, which was their first album. And this album was intended to be, the big concept double album that Jim has said every decent prog band has to do, but also was intended to be a follow-up in style, at any rate, to Million Town. And it really achieves those things with great aplomb. It's a fantastic album. And boy, is there a lot of it. I mean, it's a lot of music here, and it's dense and it's complex, But I promise you, folks, stick with it, and it will all make sense to you. Now, Jem has said that although it's a double concept album, it must be listened to as 4 sides of vinyl, if you like. So take 20-minute chunks and have side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4, and listen to it that way. And it really, really does make sense. It has all the ebbs and flows. It has all the peaks and troughs. It has the power, the metal, the melody, the complexity. And it's also a welcome return to drummer Craig Blundell, who's been playing with the Two Stevens, as they are known, and he's a busy guy. But you can just tell in Craig's performances on this album that he's overjoyed to be back in the band. And you can hear that the rest of the band are overjoyed to have him back too. There's just a lot of joy in the performances on this album. It is very Jem Godfrey focused because it's his concept, and he wrote all the songs, or co-wrote a couple of them with John Mitchell. To begin with, I was a little daunted because I thought, hey, where are the John Mitchell vocals? But you know what? Once you listen to it as all 4 sides, it makes sense that the lead vocal should be consistent. It has, for me, what is undoubtedly the song of the year in the Solid State Orchestra, which is kind of the core song of CD1. This song just takes a simple keyboard melody and develops it into this elaborate progressive rock statement. Whereas there were no solos of any kind on the previous album, there are solos aplenty on this album, and in particular in Solid State Orchestra, which for me really is I think in 20 years' time, when people are playing their kids progressive rock in 2024, that is the song to play them if you want to tell them what prog sounded like in this year. There are a lot of voiceovers, and the concept requires this DJ in space to be talking on an old radio. And when you listen to it being described, you might think that sounds cheesy, but it's not cheesy at all. It really is a high quality concept. Fabulous album of the year for me, Life in the Wires by Frost. Do not avoid, folks.
I'm really happy that it turned out this way, because when I first heard this record, I was telling you guys, this is going to be it. This is the album. And I say that fair enough about a lot of albums, but particularly with this one, I think it really turned out to hold true. I mean, it's just so great. The whole time, whenever I was listening to this album, from one song to the next, my thing was like, how is one man writing all of this? He just really outdid himself on it. If you want to watch the Frost Reports, which we got to give him credit, the Frost Report was a thing they were doing before the Prog Report was the thing. Jem did 2 videos documenting, sort of in a goofy way, the making of the album, but it's fascinating. I mean, it's essentially him in his basement with 8 million keyboards just writing this thing. It's wild. And he did just a ridiculous job. It's just awesome.
Well, I think it's a testament to be number 1, because this is sort of a combined list of all of our individual lists. And this is probably the only album that managed to make it into all of our top 5s, I would assume.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and like, I didn't chime in during Neal as well. That is an album that I love. But this one, I think, is above and beyond a lot of what we talked. The compositional wise, it really goes a lot of places that Frost has been, but a lot of places they haven't. And I think that's one of the interesting parts about it. And not to mention, they have the best keyboard sounds in the business. So that's really for a prog fan, that's just like heaven, So that's my 2 cents.
I remember when this album came out, and actually before it came out, Roie was about to distribute it to us so we could start listening to it. And Roie could barely hold his excitement in, but he didn't want to reveal how much he loved this album because he was afraid that we would all turn into, taciturn iconoclasts against him, and just say, "No, this stinks." Wow, it is
Way to call back that lyric.
Wow, it is so well done. Blundell's drums, I feel in this mix are very forward, which is terrific. It's a different sound for them to be that much more drum focused. But man, to sort of pay tribute to their best album, their classic, and to come back with this. Great job, Jim. Great job.
And I think for me, often a test of an album, is that it throws you back into the world of that band. And I totally dove back into their back catalogue and just kind of absorbed all of that. But this really is such a strong album from start to finish. It's really, really good. I mean, I would love, I think we talked about this when Jem was in the podcast, I would love to see this album played live from start to finish. I think it would be absolutely amazing to see that translated on
It would be. I hope that is able to happen sometime. Also, I mean, really the whole concept, the album design, that radio, the little website that they had with the sound bits that you could check out, everything around it was really cool conceptually, which helps. I think those kind of things make the whole album experience more fun and immersive. And so yeah, that's a good one. I think that was good. We covered everything pretty well. 16 albums. Certainly there was many more. It was a very busy year.
Shout outs to Echoverse.
Props to our friends in Echoverse, the two Kyles, their debut album, Whispers Between Worlds, a great prog epic album. Please check it out.
This couldn't make it into the list because we are very biased, but this is our symbolic number 0.
Conflict of interest.
But listen, if there's albums that you wanted covered that we missed, please leave it in the comments. Let us know what else you liked, what you thought of the list. And again, thanks to everybody that watched the podcast this year, everybody else that helped contribute to the website. We have a bunch of other people that review and help out and everything. So shout out to everybody there. And we keep this thing going. We'll see another great year of music. And thanks to the team for putting up with my emails and everything every year. And we'll see you on the other side of 2025. Don't make sure you check out the award winners video that we're going to have out soon. And we'll see you in 2025. Don't forget to subscribe. Follow us on all our socials, ProgReport.com, and everywhere else. Any last thoughts by everybody?
Oh, that's it.
Have a great 2025, everyone. It's going to be a great year.
That's exciting. Let's
Bye-bye.
do it. Happy New Year.
Hey, thanks for checking out the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all our socials and ProgReport.com. And we'll see you all again real soon. Thanks.